Hello everyone, welcome back. This is requested, that was the word I was looking for. Third atomic bomb attack, Japan, 1945. Mark Felton Productions. Before I get into it, just want to say I'm going to be eating some healthy little tray of food. I know what you're thinking. Cookies are clearly healthier for you, and I agree. I actually have a study I made up that would prove that, but I don't have it with me. But it basically just says that my current doctor, well, my old doctor, he died of cancer. I'm pretty sure it's from eating fruits and vegetables. I'm still alive. I eat cookies. Who are you going to take medical advice from? Oh, that wasn't a carrot. That was a carrot. It would have been really better if I had a cookie right then. Well, that backfired. And it's going down. Okay, so let's go ahead and get into this video starting now.
The atomic bombings of Japan are considered by many to have ended World War II. This is partially correct. Their use was a major factor in causing Japan to surrender. But it is not widely known that a third atomic bombing was planned for the 19th of August 1945, if the Japanese refused to surrender.
I thought we only had two. I guess we had a third one because we tested the first one. I thought 2 and 3. I didn't think we had another one. Clearly, I was wrong.
And there was resistance at the highest levels of the Japanese government to doing so. Of those in the know in 1945, few thought that 2 atomic bombs would bring about the Japanese surrender. Major General Leslie Groves, commanding the Manhattan Project, didn't think so. Just 3 days after the successful Trinity test of the first atomic bomb in the New Mexico desert, he wrote to Robert Oppenheimer and told him that it would be necessary to drop Little Boy and Fat Man on Japan, possibly followed by 2 more Fat Man bombs. Colonel Paul Tibbets, who had dropped the first atomic bomb on Hiroshima, wrote that it would take up to 5 bombs to cause the Japanese to surrender. Tibbets had a squadron of 15 silver-plate B-29s ready to do so if it became necessary. The problem for the Allies was Japan's profound unwillingness to surrender. The first 2 bombs did not completely do the trick. To understand what was going on, we need to explore what was happening at the highest levels of the Japanese government. Following the defeat of Germany in early May 1945, the Allied powers held a conference at Potsdam between the 16th of July and the 2nd of August. Among the subjects discussed was the defeat of Japan. An agreement called the Potsdam Declaration was drafted by the United States, Britain and China and called upon Japan to surrender unconditionally. The sticking point for the Japanese was the future status of Emperor Hirohito, the Japanese head of state, and the monarchy as an institution. The Americans wanted to abolish the monarchy and try Hirohito as a war criminal. The British favoured retaining the monarchy, perhaps with Hirohito still on the throne, to help obtain the consent of the Japanese people to an Allied occupation. However, the Finnish declaration fudged the issue of the emperor, leaving his fate vague. On the 26th of July, this declaration was given to the Japanese government via the Swiss, with the ominous warning regarding the terms of surrender. Quote, "We will not deviate from them. There are no alternatives. We shall brook no delay." Unquote. Prompt and utter destruction was promised if the terms were not accepted. The Japanese government rejected the Potsdam Declaration, at the same time trying to open negotiations through the Soviet Union for better terms, Japan not being at war with the Soviet Union at this time. However, some Japanese officials suspected that Stalin had a secret agenda, perhaps even including military action against the Japanese in Manchuria, and urged surrender to avoid the chance that Soviet forces might land in northern Japan. These warnings were ignored in Tokyo. Japanese intransigents left the US with few choices. Planning was underway for a huge amphibious invasion of Japan in December 1945. Codenamed Operation Downfall, the Japanese were expecting such a move, and Kyushu Island was heavily garrisoned by 990,000 troops, backed up by the Volunteer Fighting Corps, civilian men and women armed with old guns, Molotov cocktails, spears, swords, and so on. Japan planned to use 28 million civilians to help the Imperial Army resist the Allied attacks in the south. In addition, the Japanese...
If you're going to use your population minus any kind of major bombing, you're forcing the Allies to continue massive bombs,
in addition,
massive fire bombings, more atomic or whatever bombs. But you're almost guaranteeing that they're not going to invade. They're just going to hit you from a distance. And I think the surrender would have come eventually if the whole country's fighting. I don't know how I'm trying to phrase it. If the whole country's fighting, they're fighting to stop an invasion or anything like that. So you don't do that. You can try to open up negotiations again and say, okay, we'll give you a little better terms than what we were before because we see that you're willing to continue this. But you have to understand that this is the last chance. These are better terms. But if you refuse this, the Soviets are coming. The Americans are going to continue to bomb. You're bringing Australia, England, Canada still in this, and other countries. I'm not trying to. I'm not trying to leave out other. There's a lot. The whole Allies, they're all going to be in it. And you got to think eventually they're going to bomb you into a point where they will invade. And when they do, they're probably not going to accept a white flag. You don't want a mass genocide of a people, but if you continue to push back and hold out and fight, that could happen. I don't think it would. It wouldn't. But if that's the alternative, you got to look at what's best for us as a people for the future. Does that make sense? Sorry for talking.
The Japanese amassed 10,000 aircraft and over 2,400 suicide boats, plus 1,200 suicide divers. Allied casualties for downfall would dwarf anything seen in other large-scale amphibious operations of the war. On top of all this, in June 1945, the Japanese government had launched a campaign to mobilize all civilians across Japan to resist the invasion, with the charming name The Glorious Death of 100 Million. We should be under no illusions as to the determination of the Japanese to resist Allied encroachment onto the home islands. The Americans had only to look at the resistance of Japanese troops and civilians on Saipan and Okinawa as examples to see what would happen in December 1945. Operation Downfall would ensure that the war would drag on well into 1946, perhaps even 1947, a situation no one wanted, not least the poor Allied troops who had been fighting in Asia for 3.5 years. Hundreds of thousands of emaciated Allied prisoners of war remained in Japanese hands, and the Japanese government had issued orders to kill every one of them should the Allies land in Japan proper. The alternative was to use the new atomic bomb to try and scare the Japanese government into capitulation. On the 6th of August 1945, the B-29 Enola Gay dropped Little Boy on Hiroshima, a city containing 20,000 Japanese troops, military headquarters, and dispersed war industries. Around 100,000 people were killed. Tokyo was confused as to its significance. However, later on the 6th, President Truman announced the first use of an atomic bomb in combat.
Our meeting at Berlin was the first meeting of the great Allies since the victory was won in Europe. Naturally, our thoughts now turn to the day of victory in Japan. The British, Chinese, and United States governments have given the Japanese people adequate warning of what is in store for them. We have laid down the general terms on which they can surrender. Our warning went unheeded. Our terms were rejected. Since then, the Japanese have seen what our atomic bomb can do. They can foresee what it will do in the future. The world will note that the first atomic bomb was dropped on Hiroshima, a military base. That was because we wished in the first attack to avoid, insofar as possible, the killing of civilians. But that attack is only a warning of things to come. If Japan does not surrender, bombs will have to be dropped on her war industries, and unfortunately, thousands of civilian lives will be lost. I urge Japanese civilians to leave industrial cities immediately and save themselves from destruction. I realize the tragic significance of the atomic bomb. Its production and its use were not lightly undertaken by this government.
So what was the reaction of the Japanese cabinet to Hiroshima? They refused to believe the US announcement. Instead, independent corroboration was sought from Japanese atomic scientists. After they had corroboration, Admiral Tsuyomu Toyoda, chief of the naval staff, argued that yes, the Americans had one atomic bomb, but he didn't believe they possessed many more. Japan would not surrender. The Americans had anticipated Toyoda's reaction, so in order to bluff the Japanese into believing that the US possessed multiple bombs, a second strike was ordered on the city of Kokura. But heavy cloud cover caused the secondary target to be bombed instead on the 9th of August 1945. That was the city of Nagasaki, killing a further 40,000 people.
At 10:58 the morning of August 9th, Japanese time, the second atomic bomb was exploded over the industrial seaport city of Nagasaki. Almost the entire population of 230,000 people was engaged in the manufacture of arms, munitions, and other war products. Two great Mitsubishi factories were located in the heart of the city. To the north, one of the world's largest torpedo plants, and further south, the huge steel and arms works. The bomb, which was dropped on Nagasaki, was aimed at a point midway between the two plants in order to cause the greatest possible industrial damage. Unlike Hiroshima, the force of the explosion at Nagasaki was largely confined to the industrial valley, which was surrounded by a series of hills that shielded many other areas of the city. A great towering mushroom effect could be seen going higher and higher and reaching into the stratosphere.
Japan had already received a shock earlier that day when at 4 a.m. word was received in Tokyo that the Soviet Union had broken its neutrality pact with Japan and invaded Japanese-occupied Manchuria in northern China, where the weakened Japanese Guangdong army struggled to stop the Soviet onslaught. Soviet forces also captured southern Sakhalin Island and had orders to invade Hokkaido, the northernmost island of Japan, within 10 to 14 days. Unlike in the south, Japanese forces in Hokkaido were relatively small and weak. The spectre of communist occupation of part or all of Japan badly unsettled the Japanese leaders, none more so than Emperor Hirohito. Prime Minister Kantaro Suzuki and Foreign Minister Shigenori Togo agreed that Japan must surrender at once. The Imperial Japanese Army thought differently. Minister of War General Anami prepared to enact martial law to prevent peace. While the ministers argued about the Soviet invasion, news had arrived of the second atomic bombing. The meeting of the Japanese cabinet ended with a split, 3 in favor of peace, 3 in favor of more war. The legal position of the emperor, if Japan accepted the Potsdam Declaration, was a major sticking point, not the irradiation of hundreds of thousands of Japanese citizens. President Truman spoke again, upping the rhetoric and ending with the chilling warnings concerning the atomic bomb. Quote, "We shall continue to use it until we have completely destroyed Japan's power to make war. Only a Japanese surrender will stop us." Unquote. But was Truman bluffing? Did the Americans have any more bombs ready if Japan still refused to surrender?
I didn't think so.
Another meeting of the Imperial Cabinet that night failed to come to a consensus. Afterwards, Suzuki and Togo met with Hirohito, and an Imperial conference was convened that night. Although Japan's dire military and economic positions were acknowledged, no consensus could be reached again. Around 2 a.m. on the 10th of August, Suzuki asked the emperor to decide whether Japan fought on or surrendered. The emperor made a rambling statement and ended with the following words, quote, "I swallow my tears and give my sanction to the proposal to accept the Allied proclamation on the basis outlined by the foreign minister." Unquote.
How old was the emperor? Because I'll be honest, he looks young. To me, he looks like he's in his 30s. Man, that's... Okay, hold on. Question. The one general was going to refuse and declare martial law and keep fighting. Can't he fire him? Clearly, I don't understand how the Japanese government works in the 40s. So, couldn't he fire him or replace him? And if he was the emperor, and they believed he was like the god of, a god of them or whatever, I think that's what they thought, right? We're just going to say yes because I don't know. I'll be corrected. Why would you go against him? Oh.
Quote, "The divided cabinet accepted Hirohito's wishes, but still the issue of the emperor in post-war Japan was a contentious point. Though the foreign ministry telegrammed the Allies that Japan would accept the Potsdam Declaration, it would not accept on conditions that would, quote, prejudice the prerogatives of the emperor, unquote. This was unacceptable to the Allied powers, who would not change the Potsdam Declaration's terms. So what should the Allies do? The US had one more A-bomb assembly ready to be shipped to Tinian.
I didn't realize they had one more. And I just saw Oppenheimer, but I don't remember the third one. But hey.
And it would be ready for action on the 19th of August 1945. The Japanese might continue to quibble over the issue of the emperor, and Truman could not yet order another strike. In fact, no action would appear to the Japanese to indicate that Admiral Toyoda's warning that the US did not possess many A-bombs was correct, perhaps emboldening the Japanese to further resistance. So while Truman awaited the third bomb, the B-29 firebombing campaign continued against Japan.
Yeah, I was going to say the firebombing was brutalizing cities. So even if they Even if they didn't have the third atomic bomb on hand, they were still assembling it. Those fire bombs. You know, I'm looking at it from the standpoint of, if I'm the emperor, the loss of life for my people, because now the war is at my door, at my country's door, and now my people, the innocent people, the civilians, now they're getting put in harm's way. So I don't want to say this callously. Callously, is that the word? But your soldiers know what they signed up for. No soldier signs up because, oh God, I hope I die within 3 years. No. But you understand there's a risk reward to that. You understand it. The civilians didn't sign up for that. So if they get put into a position where now they have to become soldiers, that's not a good sign for you and your people, because you can't teach them to be soldiers. You can't teach them to defend and protect. They don't know how to fight together. I mean, they're going to be firing and then throwing knives and rocks and Molotov cocktails. Like, they're not equipped for that. So if it comes down to that, you got to look at it and say, no, we just got to pull the plug on this and just agree to terms. My opinion.
But this went awry when bad weather over Japan prevented planned attacks on the 11th of August. Indeed, ill-informed journalists thought the failure to attack was some kind of ceasefire. Truman then ordered a halt to all further conventional bombings in order not to make it appear that the Americans had abandoned peace efforts. The Japanese cabinet remained divided. Prime Minister Suzuki was for rejecting the US offer and insisting on a guarantee to protect the Japanese monarchy. General Anami was aggrieved.
If you're the emperor and he's saying we got to protect you, if you're the emperor and you don't want your people to die, and you just think, okay, this is a losing concept, you just got to tell that guy, I appreciate your concern, but it's no longer about me. It's about this country, this people, the remaining people. I understand they don't want to see him hanged or executed of some sort. I get that. But if I have to be hanged to save 28 million people, unfortunately, that's a decision I have to make. Because one is not greater than the all. But that is, don't get me wrong, I wouldn't just volunteer for it. I would certainly be, well, no, let's keep talking. No, we got to figure this out. It's my neck they're going to be putting a rope around, not yours, Tom. So let's get to talking, and be nice when you talk.
By another of the Potsdam Declaration's points, the Allied occupation of Japan, he and the Imperial Army would not accept this. But Foreign Minister Togo told the Prime Minister that the Allied terms were final, and Marquis Kido, the Lord Privy Seal, who advised the Emperor, said that Hirohito wanted Japan to surrender. Admiral Yonai was concerned about civil unrest if Japan continued the war. He said domestic circumstances provided an excuse to end the war. Later that day, Emperor Hirohito informed the rest of the imperial family of his decision to surrender. But when his uncle, General Prince Asaka, the officer responsible for the infamous rape of Nanking in China in 1937, asked him would the war continue if the Allies refused to preserve the imperial system, Hirohito replied, "Of course." Instead of dropping bombs, the Americans spent the 13th of August dropping leaflets over Japan. They laid out the surrender terms, including Japan's offer to surrender. That night, the cabinet met again, but still couldn't reach a consensus. The Allies were becoming suspicious. The Japanese had been asked to send out by uncoded radio an acceptance of the terms of unconditional surrender, but they didn't. Incredibly, intercepted radio traffic indicated that the Japanese were preparing some kind of final defense or even a mass attack. At this point, Truman ordered the resumption of bombing raids on Japan to show the Japanese that the Allies meant business. 5 days still remained before the third atomic bomb could be dropped. On the 14th of August 1945, in 2 raids, 1,014 American aircraft bombed Japan, including destroying Japan's last oil refinery that produced 67% of the nation's oil. Further attacks would follow. Truman believed that Japanese governmental indecision and intransigence would force him to order a third atomic attack, which he did not want to do. The question was, which city would have been targeted on the 19th of August? Tokyo appeared the obvious target. It contained the Imperial Palace and government ministries. The effect of
Wasn't Tokyo virtually destroyed because of the firebombing? We'll find out.
taking out the capital, already badly damaged by conventional raids, would have had a disastrous effect on Japanese morale, particularly among surviving government officials. But there is an obvious point against Tokyo as the target for the third bomb.
I wouldn't have
Such an
wanted
attack
that.
would have decapitated the government and killed the emperor, leaving no one left to negotiate with.
And everyone would have been who's left is in an uproar. They dropped a third one. They killed our emperor. No agreement. Fight to the death. Yeah, Tokyo, I would not have wanted to put Tokyo in any kind of situation like that.
Generals would have fought on with new ferocity, as the God Emperor was worshipped by ordinary Japanese and soldiers alike, and he had been assassinated by the Americans.
If you really want to screw with Japan's head, you drop that bomb on Nebraska, and then you send it to them and you go, we just did that to ourselves. What do you think we're going to do to you? Don't actually do that, though.
Instead, I would surmise that a less politically important target would have been attacked, such as Kokura, the original target for the 9th of August bombing that hit Nagasaki, or even Yokohama, the great port city near Tokyo. Another city mentioned as a target was Niigata. However, other historians have named Sapporo in the far north as a target, which would have sent a strong signal to Moscow not to invade Japan, or Hakodate, Yokosuka, home of the vast Japanese naval base and arsenal, Osaka or Nagoya. All are in...
You bomb the northern part, which pretty much tells the Soviets to not invade. Two things. One, that's either going to make Japan think, okay, we don't have to worry about them. Now maybe we can use them to negotiate. Or the Soviets have just gotten mad at the U.S. and they say, oh yeah, watch, we're going to invade in a different part now. And then they come in anyways, and they don't want to stop. Or of course, maybe none of that happens.
Intriguing theories, but for me, I would suggest Kokura, owing to prior careful planning on hitting this target. The third atomic bomb was ready to be shipped to Tinian, available for use on the 19th. Colonel Tibbets, commanding the 509th Bomb Group that dropped the A-bombs, had sent back to Wendover, Utah, 2 of his B-29s, Luke the Spook and Jabbit 3, to collect the bomb and its plutonium core and fly them to Tinian, once this material had been moved forward from the Los Alamos National Laboratory in New Mexico. But it is clear that the US government hesitated to use the third A-bomb, for no authorization was given at this time to actually fly it to Tinian. The earliest use date of the 19th of August remained on the table, however, with no formal decision taken as yet. So what actually happened to make the Japanese finally surrender? The 14th of August was decision day for the Japanese government. Hirohito met with senior army and navy officers. Many wanted to fight on, but Field Marshal Shunroku Hata, commanding the 2nd General Army, headquarters Hiroshima, did not. Hata's job was to prevent the US landings, the great fight to the death. He told the Emperor that his army could not defeat the Americans. A cabinet meeting followed, but General Anami, Admiral Toyoda, and General Umetsu all called for continued resistance. But Hirohito made his decision. he decided to surrender, the cabinet fell in line and backed him. Immediately afterwards, the decision was broadcast to the Allies, but it was not over yet. The Emperor recorded the Imperial rescript on surrender at 11 p.m., an NHK recording crew going to the palace. It was planned to broadcast the Emperor's words to the Japanese people the following day, 15th of August 1945. But a coup was planned to prevent this recording from ever being broadcast, for many Japanese army officers wanted the war to continue. The coup plot had actually begun on the 12th of August, led by Major Hatanaka, supported by several other senior officers, including General Anami's brother-in-law. They tried to pressure Anami into rejecting the Potsdam Declaration, but Anami refused to go against the Emperor's wishes. Hatanaka and his
Wait, what do you gain? It's just more loss of life to refuse. And to keep fighting. And there's no guarantee that man is going to... There's no guarantee this guy right here, if they refuse, is going to die in the battle. Now, afterwards, he could be signaled out and then they could execute him that way, after they invade or whatever. But by this guy's refusal, how many more hundreds, thousands, hundreds of thousands, get thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people would have died before he would have? It's easy to be brave when you're not on the front lines. And that guy was not going to be on the front lines.
Hatanaka and his
That's why I talk a lot of trash. I could have taken him.
co-conspirators decided to launch a coup d'etat and replace the government with one prepared to fight on. At 9:30 p.m. on the 14th of August, Major Hatanaka's coup was launched. Hatanaka had convinced the commanding officer of the 2nd Regiment of the 1st Imperial Guards Division, Colonel Haga, that the coup was widely supported by Japanese generals and the Emperor, and Haga moved his regiment into the palace, supplementing the battalion already on guard duty there. Hatanaka's original plan was to occupy the palace to incite other units to rebel against the surrender. Around 2 p.m. on the 15th of August, General Anami committed ritual suicide for unclear reasons. Hatanaka and his men surrounded the palace. They demanded Lieutenant General Takeshi Mori, commander of the 1st Imperial Guards Division, join them. He refused, so Hatanaka killed him.
Jeez.
He then used Mori's official stamp to author...
I wonder if that's why the one guy committed suicide. Because even though he was wanting to resist, when it came down to it, he fell in line. And he hated the fact that he fell in line. But he fell in line because that's what the Emperor told him. And then he gets told, hey, look, do you want to join this? And he was probably like, I do. But I can't. And maybe they were like, think it over. And his thinking was, fall on a sword or however he did it. But maybe he took himself out instead of being responsible for something that he wanted, but at the same time he knew wasn't good. Maybe.
Authorized the army to take over the palace and the Imperial Household Ministry to, quote, protect the Emperor, unquote. They also searched frantically for the surrender speech recording, but failed to find it. During all this, Emperor Hirohito was in his plush underground bunker, the Gobunko, beneath the palace grounds. The Emperor never confronted the rebels face to face. Interestingly, Hirohito and his family would continue to live in the bunker until 1961, when the Imperial Palace's main buildings, destroyed by American air raids, were rebuilt into the present palace complex.
Interesting.
Other Japanese army officers tried to kill Prime Minister Suzuki, who escaped minutes before they arrived. In the meantime, loyal troops were coming to crush the coup. Colonel Haga, realizing that he had been duped, removed his 2nd Regiment from the palace. An hour before Hirohito's surrender was broadcast.
Oh, that one guy. Oh, he was duped. Okay.
At 12 noon on the 15th of August, Hatanaka shot himself. But what would have happened if the coup had succeeded? The war would have continued, and the third bomb would have been dropped on or after the 19th of August. Even after the 15th of August surrender, Japanese forces continued fighting. The last US plane shot down over Japan was brought down on the 18th of August, and Japanese forces continued fighting the Soviets until early September 1945. In fact, the third atomic bomb was kept on standby at Los Alamos until the 2nd of September 1945, as the Allies feared some new coup might yet occur, and the Japanese resumed the fight, especially as large-scale US occupation forces only began to arrive in Japan from the 30th of August onwards, and millions of Japanese troops remained under arms in Japan and across Asia. On the 2nd of September, the formal surrender ceremony was held aboard the USS Missouri in Tokyo Bay, and General Douglas MacArthur became the de facto ruler of Japan, the emperor remaining as part of a much reformed political and monarchical system.
永遠の平和を念願する日本国憲法の理想を心とし、民主主義に基づく文化国家建設の目的に向かって、私たちは着々歩みを進めています。
Emperor Hirohito lived on until 1989.
Wow.
What this program has hopefully tried to convey was the complexity of the Japanese surrender and the choices left open to President Truman and the Allies, including the ultimate weapon, the A-bomb. The responsibility for prosecuting and then refusing to end the war lay on the shoulders of the Japanese government, and its callous disregard of civilian casualties certainly is quite obvious in any reading of these events. If you were President Truman, what would you have done when faced with such an implacable foe? Thanks for watching. Please subscribe.
I don't wish to be in any of their shoes. I understand why it was dropped. I would love to say I wish it wasn't dropped. I wish that it could have been viewed by both sides like, hey, look guys, we got a handful of these things. Here's one just to show you what it can do. You know, and but then again, if I'm the other side and somebody says that and they drop one part of me is thinking, ooh. But another part of me is thinking, do they really have multiple? Maybe they only have one. Show us the others. Drop a second one. Pick a different place. Drop that one. You know, I don't envy anyone in that situation. Why do people keep? What? I got like 15 messages all of a sudden. Am I dead? Better not be dead. Oh, I hate when that happens. Yeah, I'm glad the third one wasn't dropped. I'm iffy on the second one. First one, I see both sides. I'm if you say it helped end the war, yes, it needed to be dropped. If you say it didn't need to be dropped because they were going to surrender, and I'm like, yeah, okay, I'm on both sides of it, but I do not wish to be in Truman's shoes. No. I mean, yeah, I don't have anything else to add. I would just be sitting here going, making noises. Okay, I'm gonna end this here. This callus is really annoying me. All right. It's been there for like 15 years. It is what it is. I got busted up knuckles. I got knuckles with another little knuckle growing out of it because I'm on my knuckles all the time. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah, there you can see it a little better. Oh yeah. Knuckle 2. Knuckle 1, knuckle 2. Knuckle 1, knuckle 2. Oh yeah. It happens. It's what I do. Alright. So I'm gonna end this here. And like and subscribe for more videos. And until next time, have a good day, have a good night.